Born into fading southern wealth, Nancy Astor rose from scandal and heartbreak to conquer British high society. A witty, fearless American, she shattered political barriers, but her controversial views would ultimately make her one of history's most divisive figures. This is her story. Nancy Witcher Langhorne was born at Langhorne House in Danville, Virginia on the 19th of May, 1879. She was the 8th of 11 children born to her mother Nancy Witcher Keene and her father, Chiswell Danby Langhorne. The Langhornes were an old southern family of considerable wealth, having made their riches in the 18th and 19th centuries from slave labour and the booming production of tobacco and cotton, the backbone of the plantation economy. The Langhornes had also expanded into railway construction during the booming 1840s and 1850s. But Chiswell Langhorne's business empire crumbled after the Civil War and the abolition of slavery, leaving the family in steep decline. By the time Nancy was born in 1879, the Langhornes had endured years of hardship for the first time in many decades. Chiswell soon managed to turn things around though. Using his family's long-established business contacts, he acquired some significant railway construction contracts in the southern states during the years of post-Civil War Reconstruction, and used these to build up the Langhornes' wealth in the late 1870s and into the 1880s. By the early 1890s, as Nancy blossomed into her teenage years, the Langhornes had triumphantly clawed their way back to wealth and social prominence. Back then, building wealth was very different. Today though, there are all kinds of ways to make money, and one of my favourites is today's sponsor, Testimall. If you haven't heard of Testimall, it's a loyalty rewards app that prizes users with real money payouts for playing popular mobile games. As you all know, I'm a big fan of mobile games, so I get rewards for playing games that I would have played anyway, and I've also found other fun games. Best of all, it's really simple. First, simply download the app and give it access to track your game progress. Next, pick a game. Then play the game, and Testimall will track your progress behind the scenes, rewarding you with coins as you go. I've played loads of games as you can see, but my favourite is Monopoly Go, and I've already earned thousands of coins in just a few hours. It's that easy. Once you've stacked up enough coins, head to the payout tab and cash out. Options include PayPal credit, Amazon gift cards, or deals from your favourite brands, so there's something for everyone. I spent my coins on Udemy, as I always wanted to try it out. Testimall also runs promotions and bonus coin opportunities, making earning even easier. So start playing great games while earning rewards, and use my link or my QR code on screen to get up to 3,999 coins as a welcome bonus. Now back to the video. By the early 1890s, Nancy spent much of her time between the Langhornes' new manor in Virginia and the family's residence in New York, a city where every powerful dynasty of America's Gilded Age had a grand residence. There, Nancy attended a finishing school for young women, and she was trained in everything from the classics and foreign languages to dancing and social graces. The Langhorne sisters would later become famous for both their beauty and education, and as you will see, Nancy in particular would prove her sharp intellect in years to come, though never without stirring her fair share of controversy. While still a teenager in New York, Nancy met Robert Gould Shaw II, an heir to a wealthy Boston family celebrated for its contributions to the Union cause during the Civil War. They married in Manhattan on October 27, 1897, just months after Nancy had turned 18. Unfortunately, their marriage was troubled almost from the very start. Robert was 7 years older than Nancy, but it wasn't their age difference that caused the problems in their marriage. Even the birth of a son, Robert Jr., in 1898 could not save it, and by 1901 the couple had separated. Friends of Robert painted Nancy as a puritanical control freak who smothered her husband, while Nancy's acquaintances argued that the marriage ended because Robert was an alcoholic womanizer. In truth, both sides may have been right. Heartbroken but determined, Nancy set out to reinvent herself, an ambition that would soon carry her across the Atlantic and into history. Nancy didn't officially divorce Robert until 1903, a year marked by another heartbreak, with the death of her mother. Grieving and adrift, she returned to Virginia to live at her father's house. In 1904, eager for a fresh start, Nancy set off on a tour of England, bringing her young son Bobby with her, over whom she had gained full custody. And she quickly fell in love with England. Sensing her reluctance and seeing how happy she was abroad, her father encouraged her to move there permanently, telling her it had been her mother's wish as well. To ease the transition, he even suggested that she take her younger sister Phyllis along for the adventure. It wasn't long until Nancy was known in English society as a witty and intriguing American. She had arrived at a time when wealthy young American women were famously marrying into the British aristocracy to gain social standing, the so-called dollar princesses. Because of this ongoing trend, she was once asked, "Have you come to get our husbands?" To which Nancy shot back, "If you knew the trouble I had getting rid of mine." This remark instantly charmed the room, and hinted at her quick wit that would soon make her a star of London society. Funnily enough, it wasn't long until Nancy found herself a new husband. In 1905 she met Waldorf Astor, the son of William Waldorf, Viscount Astor, a major American-British businessman and philanthropist. He had inherited a significant fortune from his father, John Jacob Astor III, and later amassed more wealth through various business ventures, most notably through a hotel empire, which still spans the world today. Coincidentally, Nancy and Waldorf were the exact same age, both born on the same day in 1879, and he had also been born in the States, though he had grown up in Britain. They developed a close relationship and were married in 1906, when they were both 27 years old. When Waldorf's father passed away in 1919, they would become Lord and Lady Astor, and this title would stay with Nancy for the rest of her life. The couple mainly lived in London after marrying, where they had a lavish townhouse on St. James's Square, splitting their time between there and a large country estate in Buckinghamshire. Unlike her first marriage, Nancy's relationship with Waldorf was a happy one. He was a devoted and loving husband, and they eventually had 5 children together: William Waldorf, born in 1907, Nancy Phyllis, born in 1909, Francis David, born in 1912, Michael, born in 1916, and a 4th boy, John Jacob, born in 1918. This life allowed Nancy to flourish as a prominent hostess among the social elite, but her ambition didn't stop there, setting the stage for her entry into a much larger arena: British politics. Nancy Astor is most well known today as being the first female Member of Parliament in British parliamentary history, or at least the first female MP to take her seat. In actual fact, it was Constance Markievicz of Ireland who was the first female MP, having been elected to Westminster in 1918. Yet, she never took her seat in Parliament. This was because she was a member of the Sinn Féin party, which refused to take their seats in London, instead forming a breakaway parliament in Dublin. From early on in their marriage, Nancy had encouraged her husband to attempt a career in politics. He was successful in this, and in 1918 he was the MP for Plymouth Sutton. Yet, with the death of his father in 1919, Waldorf became the second Viscount Astor, becoming a member of the House of Lords, forcing him to give up his seat. This triggered a by-election in the Plymouth Sutton constituency, and with the success of the recent suffrage movement in Britain, Nancy seized the opportunity, campaigning for the seat. At 40 years of age, she won the by-election in November 1919, making history as the first woman to take a seat in the British Parliament. Nancy Astor would hold her seat for the next 26 years. As we will see, She was known to be cruel, and her time as an MP was often quite controversial, but it was also marked by significant accomplishments. She joined as a member of the Conservative and Unionist Party, known simply as the Conservatives, and colloquially as the Tories. In the late 1920s, Lady Astor campaigned on a number of issues like protecting women from mistreatment, advocating for fairer treatment of teenagers in court, and supporting efforts to assist vulnerable women and single mothers in London and other major cities. Astor also championed other women entering politics, serving from 1924 as the first president of the Electoral Association for Women, which promoted female involvement in politics in Britain and the US. In the interwar years, she emerged as one of Parliament's leading feminist figures, her most lasting legacy. But as the political climate darkened, Lady Astor's views would take a far more controversial turn. If the 1920s were a period of promise and accomplishment for Nancy in political life, the 1930s were the direct opposite. In an age of growing political extremism across the Western world, she became increasingly vocal in her support for a wide range of controversial political positions. For instance, Nancy was fiercely opposed to Roman Catholicism, a prejudice shaped by the wave of Irish and Italian immigration to America between the 1840s and 1920s. However, her hardline views clashed with the more tolerant and secular attitudes that were taking hold in Britain. As damaging as her anti-Catholicism was, though, it is eclipsed in retrospect by the controversy surrounding her views on the Jewish people. There is no denying that Nancy Astor was an anti-Semite. This attitude, though, was far from unusual in Europe during the interwar years. It's important to remember that as the Nazi regime escalated its persecution of the Jewish people in the 1930s, both the British and American governments only offered limited support to refugees fleeing Germany and Austria. But Nancy Astor's anti-Semitism ran even deeper. She believed in a popular conspiracy theory of the time that claimed Jews were secretly working with socialists and communists to tear down Western society and build a new world order. In the late 1930s, Nancy Astor formed a notorious alliance with Joseph Kennedy Sr., the US ambassador to Britain and father of President John F. Kennedy. Apparently, Astor even suggested to Kennedy that Nazi persecution of the Jews was not enough to justify dragging Britain and America into war. She also maintained a cordial relationship with Joachim von Ribbentrop, the Nazi ambassador to Britain, speaking favourably of him during the late 1930s. But these extremist views would eventually push her into political isolation, marking the beginning of the end for her career. The outbreak of the Second World War in 1939 and the entry of the United States into the conflict in December 1941 saw Lady Astor cast into the political wilderness, as her favourable earlier stance on the Nazis was dragged up by her political opponents. These political difficulties were compounded by personal adversity, as she lost family members and had to deal with the increasingly erratic behaviour of her son from her first marriage, who had acquired his father's affinity for excessive drinking. Astor did little to repair her reputation as the war dragged on, and her controversial remarks only fueled public anger. She was widely criticised for suggesting that British soldiers fighting on the Southern Front, particularly in Italy, were cowards trying to avoid the more dangerous battles in northern France after D-Day. This, combined with her unrepentant views on ethnic and religious minorities, and her stance towards the Jewish people, even as the horrors of the Holocaust were being revealed across Europe in 1944 and 1945, led the Conservative Party leaders to conclude that she was a liability. When Prime Minister Winston Churchill called a snap election just weeks after the war ended in the summer of 1945, Nancy Astor was bluntly told she would have no support if she tried to run again, not from her party, and not even from her own family. Her husband warned her that if she stood for office, she would be standing alone. Furious and humiliated, she was forced to step aside. After 26 years in Parliament, Nancy Astor's political career ended not with applause, but with resentment and regret. And her downfall was just the beginning of a long and lonely final chapter. Nancy's retirement from politics left her deeply embittered. At public events, she often lashed out, blaming the Conservative leadership for forcing her out of Parliament. As Britain grew more liberal, Nancy's old-fashioned views seemed increasingly out of step, and her bitterness took a heavy toll on her marriage. She and Waldorf began travelling separately, and soon were living apart. Yet, despite the rift, the two reconciled shortly before Waldorf's death on the 30th of September 1952. He was 73 years old when he passed. Nancy Astor lived to be 84 years of age, dying in Grimsthorpe Castle in England on the 2nd of May 1964. Her last years were ones of isolation. All of her many siblings had died before her, and Nancy's relationship with her children became strained to the point of having little or no contact with them. Though her daughter Nancy did care for her in her final illness. Today, Nancy Astor's legacy is a battlefield of contradictions. To some, she remains a feminist icon and trailblazer who shattered political barriers for women. To others, she is remembered as an unrepentant anti-Semite whose bigotry stains her accomplishments. The truth is, she was both a pioneer and a deeply flawed character. Thank you so much everyone for watching this video on Nancy Astor. I hope you found it interesting. Let me know what you thought of her life down below in the comments, and if you have any suggestions, also leave them down below in the comments. Anyway, I hope you guys are subscribed and have notifications turned on to get all my videos as soon as I upload them. Anyway, that's all from me, so I'll see all of you in the next Forgotten Life. Thanks.